Hello, and welcome to another look with Christian King. It is Sunday, January 13th. Going to do the preview show for next week's UFC on ESPN Plus One, which sounds like a wedding invitation. So it's UFC on ESPN 1. Sounds weird because you're saying plus one, but it's the first event on there. I'm sick, if you can't tell that by listening to my voice, but that's okay. We're going to power through this. To be honest with you, I'm not super excited about this card. I don't think it's particularly good, and it's the first one we've had in a while, so that's a little unfortunate. I think the main event's great, but that's really about the only fight on here, in my opinion, that's particularly good. Maybe I'm being a little bit of a downer, but we're going to start at the bottom and just start going up. ESPN. Also, too, I'm kind of bummed out about this because we've switched from the whole Fox platform to the ESPN platform, and it's still, 6 p.m. tune into this channel, and then 8 p.m. it's on this channel, and then, 6 p.m. go back to, or, 10 p.m. go back to online. It's just a lot of jumping around. Also, too, it doesn't look to me like the pacing is going to be any better because they still have a half an hour per fight. So still going to be one of those things where it takes all night to watch a sporting event, which is unfortunate compared to other sports because obviously if you're watching, an NFL playoff game, it's prime time. You're not, whereas in fights, it's like the prime time is, the middle of the card, and then by the time you get to the main event, it's 1 a.m, which sucks. So we're going to skip over this. So ESPN Plus, 6 p.m. Eastern Time is the first prelims. Bilal Muhammad's fighting Geoff Neal. Dennis Bermudez is fighting T. Edwards, who got knocked out pretty recently by Don Madge, so I'm not sure how he's already fighting again. It seems a little bit rushed, but we're going to skip over that. The prelims are on ESPN, just regular ESPN, which is super cool if the card was at all good, but the card's on here, in my opinion, is not at all interesting. We did have some fights drop out kind of at the last minute. Corey Sandhagen was supposed to fight John Lineker, which would have been interesting. Now he's fighting a guy I've never heard of who is 0-0. So I guess this is pro debut, if that's even possible. I'm going to click on his name. Mario Batista. Yeah, he has fought in the LFA, so I guess he's 0-0 in the UFC. And this might even be his pro debut. I doubt it, but and then Alonzo Menifield taking on Vinicius Mariah. I haven't heard of either one of them. Joanne Calderwood is taking on Ariane Lipsky. That should be interesting, but no idea about the opponent. I just know Joanne Calderwood. So the first pick I'm going to make, we've got Donald Cerrone taking on Alexander Hernandez. This is going to be the final fight on this main ESPN card. It's a real shame they couldn't have thrown together a better card for this, in my opinion. I mean, this first time UFC is going to be on ESPN, and these 4 fights, none of them, to me, are at all exciting. I mean, or at all anything to get excited about being on ESPN. It's not a good start, in my opinion. This fight, Cowboy Cerrone and Alexander Hernandez, I mean, it's a fun action fight, but they could have done so much better with this card. So with that, I'm definitely gonna pick Alexander Hernandez, mostly just because this fight's at 155 pounds, I believe, unless this fight's at welterweight. That's a big problem. I don't know what weight class this fight's at. That's really weird. Alexander Hernandez is a lightweight, so I'm guessing that this fight's at lightweight. So here's the deal. If this fight's at welterweight, then we can talk. If this fight's at lightweight, like I think it is, then I'm picking Alexander Hernandez. Donald Cerrone hasn't cut that much weight in a long time, and Alexander Hernandez is a fast starter and a vicious pressure fighter. And Donald Cerrone does not do well with guys who start fast or guys who pressure him, especially not if he's having to cut 15 more pounds than he has in like 2 years or over 2 years since he's been at lightweight. So I'm definitely going to pick Alexander Hernandez to win this fight in the first round by KO TKO. And hopefully this fight will go on long enough that we get a little action for the ESPN main channel. We're going to move on to so then at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, we switch back over to ESPN Plus for this card, and we open up with Carl Roberson versus Glover Teixeira. Carl Roberson has looked pretty darn good as of late. He had that one prospect loss. We got submitted by Cesar Ferreira, but he looked really dominant in his win over Jack Marshman. That was very impressive. Glover Teixeira has not looked very good as of late. I'm just going to keep this one simple. I'm going to take Carl Roberson to win a unanimous decision. That's just this kind of this. I mean, I'm going to pick him to win. I'm going to say decision. He might get the finish, but bottom line is I'm picking Carl to win. Let's go back and look at the odds real quick. I forgot to look at the odds for Donald Cerrone versus Alexander Hernandez, which, like I said, I'm assuming is a lightweight fight. If it's not a lightweight fight, that does change things. Alexander Hernandez is a pretty good size favorite. You can get him as low as minus 186. Cowboy Cerrone, you can get him as high as plus 169, and then that fight I just rattled off, Roberson versus Glover Teixeira, that is a light heavyweight fight, and as of now, I am not seeing any odds on that fight for some reason, which is very weird. So I'm just going to move on to, yeah, that's really weird. Usually you can find odds for a fight. Like, that's a main card fight and there's no odds. That's weird. Okay. So, yeah, I picked Carl Roberson to win unanimous decision. After that, we've got Rachel Ostovich versus Paige Van Zant. This fight is, I don't know if this is really the best representation of women's MMA, but these are two popular fighters. They're both, just to be blunt, they're both very attractive young ladies, which I'm sure ESPN and the UFC are happy with. And, they're going to be going up against each other at 125 pounds. Paige Van Zant's only fought there one time. Rachel Ostovich is 4-4, though. She's not exactly an elite fighter. I think Paige Van Zant is just going to be more active, and I think she just has trained with better people, more experience under the big lights. I'm going to take Paige Van Zant to win a unanimous decision. She's the favorite. Best odds you can get her at is minus 152, and the best odds for Rachel Ostovich is plus 140 as the underdog. All right. So then after that, we have a rematch, which I'm not quite sure why we're having this rematch, but Joseph Benavidez is going to fight Dustin Ortiz again. He beat Dustin Ortiz by unanimous decision the first time they fought, and I think he's going to beat him by unanimous decision the second time they fight. And that is also at 125 pounds, just like that women's fight before it. Yep, Joseph Benavidez, pretty big favorite. Best odds you can get him at is minus 234. Dustin Ortiz, highest odds you can get him at is plus 206. I think the fight will be closer than the first time, but I still think Joe B will take up a unanimous decision. This next one will be a little interesting to talk about. We got Gregor Gillespie taking on Yancy Medeiros. So here's the interesting thing about this, okay? Oh, by the way, I did want to go back and say one thing. In that Cowboy Cerrone fight versus Alexander Hernandez, I actually think really Cowboy's best shot of winning that fight is by submission. Kind of like he got Perry if Alexander Hernandez gets over aggressive, engages in too much grappling. So I just want to throw that out there. I meant to say that. Okay, so we've got Gregor Gillespie taking on Yancy Medeiros at 155 pounds. So let's talk about some of the interesting points of this one. I love watching Gregor Gillespie fight. I mean, you just noticed my voice change probably. I mean, I'm actually kind of excited about this fight. This is the first one on here that really gets me interested. So here's the issue. Gregor Gillespie is not a big 155er. I think that the weight cut to 145 might be too much for him, although his style, being the bigger guy, would be beneficial. He has endless cardio. Yancy Medeiros is a huge 155er, and he's been up at 170, and now he's coming back down to 155 where this fight's taking place. He's 15-5. Gregor Gillespie's 12-0. Gregor Gillespie is not going to finish you with a big knockout punch or anything. He's going to take you down, grind on you, hit you with some ground and pound. He might get the finish that way, but he's not going to spark Yancy Medeiros out cold. Whereas if Yancy was fighting Dustin Poirier again at lightweight, that's what I'd be worried about happening because of how much weight he cuts. I don't think Gregor Gillespie's a big knockout threat, but I do think that he is liable to take down Yancy and control him and win this fight. But the issue with that is that Yancy is going to be by far the biggest, most powerful opponent Gregor's ever faced, and we haven't really seen Gregor get cracked hard. I mean, I'm sure he has in one of his 12 fights. I haven't watched all 12 of them, in fairness to him, but I can't imagine that he has been hit as hard as Yancy could potentially hit him. And my concern with that is, could we be seeing someone who is getting the distance kept on them and they're getting hit with big shots and they start to panic, trying to get that takedown. Yancy is not known for his takedown defense, though, so therefore I am going to go with the safer pick, and I'm going to go with Gregor Gillespie I don't think he'll be able to get a submission or a ground and pound finish, so I'm going to take Gregor to win a unanimous decision. And if you notice my picks, we're just watching decision after decision, back to back to back. And at this point, it'll be like 1 a.m, and I'll be tired. So sorry, I'm being a real downer. So let's look at that odds on that men's lightweight fight. Or just lightweight, I should say. Gregor Gillespie's a huge favorite. Best odds, you can get him as minus 505. Wow, that's high. And Yancy, you can get him as high as plus 437. So I guess I'm not breaking any news by making that Gregor pick. And then after that, we have a fight between Alan Crowder and an NFL player who was kicked out of the NFL and then got like a second chance or something and got in more trouble with drugs, and he's had some domestic violence issues in the past. And, honestly, Luke Thomas had a really good point, which is that if somebody has a bad past and they're not allowed to make money fighting in a cage, how are they allowed to make money? But here's my real issue with this is that this former NFL player, he doesn't deserve to be fighting in a co-main event in the UFC. He doesn't deserve to be in the UFC. He's 3-0 as a pro, and he's fought all bums. He hasn't fought anyone good yet. He fought one guy who maybe you could say is halfway, has the potential to be good, but the dude's too small to be a heavyweight. And so therefore, I'm not even going to mention his name, and I'm not going to talk about this fight, and I'm not going to pick it, because my issue is that people think that if they just talk about something that they don't like over and over, it'll make it go away. But actually what you're doing is you're adding fuel to the fire, and you're making it a bigger deal. So it would be making it a bigger deal for me to talk about this guy. And I mean, not that I'm not making anything a big deal, because not a lot of people listen to the show, but overall for media, that's like a big thing. They get all mad about stuff like this. They don't want him on the card. They don't think he deserves to be on the card, but then they talk about it all the time. I'm not even going to pick this fight because this isn't a serious fight. Alan Crowder, I'll give him a shout out and I'll be cheering for him. But the other guy that we're talking about, he has no business being in the UFC right now. He has no business being in a co-main event. It's just the whole thing's completely silly, and I'm not even going to give it any notice or make a pick or anything. I'll be cheering for Alan Crowder. So then we have the main event of the evening. We have TJ Dillashaw going down to 125 pounds to try and take Henry Cejudo's title and become a 2-division champion. My concern is this fight even going to happen? Because TJ Dillashaw, if you've seen the pictures of him where he weighs 138 pounds, he looks like Skeletor, and he still has to cut 13 more pounds. So he's dieted down really low, and then he'll have to cut all the water weight out of his muscles. He does have a I know I did a like kind of weight cutting for dummies thing a while back, but if you didn't listen to that, it's counterintuitive, but actually having low body fat and high amount of muscle makes it easier to cut weight, because the water that you're just cutting water, you're not like burning fat all in one day and then gaining the fat back. That would be impossible. What you're doing is you're dehydrating your muscles and then you're rehydrating your muscles. So the more muscle you have and the less body fat you have, you can actually cut weight easier. If you were like a pudgy, kind of like, it's a picture of someone with like a dad bod. If you have a dad bod, that's not a good body for cutting weight. Even though you might think that person has more weight to lose, that person has more weight to lose if they diet and lose it over time. But as far as cutting weight, the person that has a lot of muscle has the most weight to lose cutting weight, because muscles carry so much water in them. It's like a gram per something. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know that you can get a lot of water out of your muscles, and that's why these guys look so much less muscular when they look just so much leaner when they're weighing in, and then when they're rehydrated, it's kind of like their muscles balloon back up because they're being rehydrated. That's why bodybuilders use things like creatine monohydrate to pump their muscles up with water and give them that beach muscle look, which doesn't really do you any good in the real world, but it looks cool, I guess, if you're into that. All right, so this fight, worried if it's even going to happen, worried about TJ Dillashaw's health making this weight cut. But for the sake of this show, we're going to have to assume that he's going to make the weight. I'm not going to assume that he's not going to make the weight. So we're going to assume he's going to make the weight and the fight's going to happen. So if that is the case, and once again, another assumption I'm making is that he is healthy enough to compete to the best of his ability. Now, these are major assumptions because there's a very good chance his abilities will be compromised by cutting 10 more pounds than usual. But for the sake of the show, we're going to assume that his abilities remain intact. And at that point, TJ Dillashaw is just simply the better, more well-rounded MMA fighter out of the two. That doesn't really leave us with a whole lot to debate here. TJ Dillashaw has more variety in his game. He has more volume in his game. I don't really see anywhere where Henry Cejudo beats a healthy TJ Dillashaw. I'm not sure if TJ will be able to stop him. Henry Cejudo has a really big head, which helps you not get knocked out, and he also just seems to have a really good chin. And TJ cutting an extra 10 pounds, I'm sure he'll lose some power off of his striking. So I don't necessarily know if TJ will finish him. I think it's very liable to go the full distance. But assuming that TJ's healthy, which is what I'm assuming, then I think we're going to have our 5th or 6th decision in a row or whatever, ignoring the co-main event fight that I'm not talking about, which will probably end in 3 seconds. So as far as the legit, actual UFC caliber fights on this card, I think they're going to be all decisions. So welcome to ESPN, UFC. Enjoy watching a 5-hour broadcast or 7-hour broadcast or some craziness. This thing's going to take forever. Hopefully not. We can always hope. But I think that TJ Dillashaw is going to take a unanimous decision, assuming that he's healthy enough to compete to the best of his abilities. So with the odds on that fight, just to let y'all know, is TJ Dillashaw, best odds is minus 189. Henry Cejudo, highest odds for him is plus 174. So not too far apart. If anything, I'd probably put the odds closer because of the fact that we don't know how healthy TJ Dillashaw will be. But yeah, I'm definitely excited about that fight. The only thing that's keeping me from being fully excited about it is just my concerns that it won't happen. And that's always one big downside of being an MMA fan, is that you can only get so excited for fights, because think about if you're a hardcore MMA fan. So, okay, the first pay-per-view that I ordered was UFC 168. So I've not been watching I've been watching every event since UFC 168. That's not really that long, but even just in that amount of time that I've been watching every single event, I can't even tell you how many fights have been canceled or messed up due to weight cutting or injuries at the last minute or sickness at the last minute. And when you're cutting that much weight, your immune system is so compromised. I mean, dude, if TJ Dillashaw walks through the same room that someone had the flu in a day ago, he's going to get the flu. I mean, obviously not necessarily, but very high probability that he ends up getting compromised in some way, losing this extra 10 pounds, whether it's being sick, his immune system shutting down, whether it's having organ issues, liver issues, kidney issues. I'm really concerned about that. So I'm not fully letting myself get excited about this fight. And I will tell you right now, if something happens to that fight, this card is shot. There is nothing else on this card that is worth staying up late for. There just isn't. This card is dependent on that one fight, and if anything happens to that fight, it's going to be a huge letdown for the UFC's debut on ESPN. But you know what? If there's any man who I trust to make an insane weight cut and do it professionally, it's TJ Dillashaw. The dude is a very intelligent human being, college educated, very obsessed with research. He's got very good people around him. So if anyone can do it, Dillashaw can do it. And I'm taking him to win that fight by unanimous decision. All right. I don't feel great, as you can tell. I'm going to take some more cold medicine, hopefully knock this thing out, and I will hopefully sound better when I come back next weekend to recap these fights. Y'all have a good week.